Hi everybody, Chris Stellion here of Gam Keto. I can't be long. I've got a tea timer about to go off. Got a private training call to jump to here in just a minute. But what I do want to talk about is just 3 simple things that came up today when I was helping out with a high school in the area. This is one of these things that I want to again thank everyone who's been a part of helping our Patreon be successful so far. That does allow me to, I was able to take today, every period from 9 a.m. up to the full work day, just went and just helped out with a local high school where they have some beginning game development going on. And there's a few tips that came up as a recurring theme that I'd like to share for more people out there who are also making your first games. And these aren't about specific programming languages, these aren't about specific platforms. This is general tips for how to get from you've got some vague idea for what you want to do, maybe even a design document, and you're not yet building it. Even if you know how to do some building, like how do you get across that scary gap? And so 3 quick things for that. The first of them is that it's really valuable to do a mock-up screenshot. And by a mock-up screenshot, it doesn't have to look like final game art. I just mean, you could do it on paper, if you prefer. Draw a rectangle about the dimensions of what you expect your game to look like. And on that, draw where and how big is the player character, if that's a thing. Where or how big are there buttons to click? Where are they on the screen? Are there some values on the screen, like health or ammo or score or points or progress or timer, or what numbers or labels appear on the screen and approximately where? And in the process, you're also having to figure out, what's the general perspective on the scene? Is it an overhead kind of Pokemon style? Is it a side view kind of Mario looking? Is it a puzzle game of some kind? But just in doing that quick sketch, where you're really trying to fill the space with the kinds of elements. Is it crowded with enemies? Is it sparse with enemies? Are there objects and items and power-ups and collectibles? Is there a goal someplace on the screen? These are things that can help get from, I have a design document with some pros ideas I can discuss, to something that then becomes much easier to use as almost a checklist. Like, you think of that mock-up screenshot as a visual checklist, and as you're working on your game, you can piece by piece make those parts work, and then ask yourself, well, does that character move yet? Does that number hook up yet? Is this value in the interface how it's supposed to be? And that's just a good way to get to core first playable. So that's first tip right there. Secondly, is that if you're kind of at a standstill of not quite sure what's within your skills yet, and this can be an intimidating complication, and sometimes experienced game developers will kind of make fun of this, but it's hard to gauge what's hard and how hard it is when you're new. That's life. So what I encourage, another way to think about that is to kind of work backwards from, what are some things you've done so far? Tutorials, sample code, maybe if you had some class instruction, if you had some just really introductory learning. What are some of those, and how could you repurpose or modify that to become something more relevant to the concept and the theme you're going for? And so one thing we had in this case, so our class, they had learned how to make rain fall by having little spawners at the top of the screen shoot down steady rain pieces. And a point I was trying to make is that depending on the kind of game that they're trying to design, the kind of theme that they're trying to work with, and this is their first game. We're not trying to make their magnum opus or anything huge. We're trying to make a first original project. One way to work with that is, okay, if you can get spawners at the top of the screen just making things trickle down, then if you make it so you have to collect those, now you've got one kind of game. If you make it so you have to dodge those, maybe they're bombs, maybe they're just something dangerous, rocks, right? Suddenly you have something where maybe it's a ship in the ocean weaving through rocks, or a jeep weaving through landmines, or a spaceship weaving through asteroids. If you turn the whole thing on the side, you suddenly have a kind of a shmup type format in a way that really just comes from restyling those visually, doing some modifications to what happens in the event of collisions, but it works backwards from, okay, what's something I already kind of knew how to do or had started, and how can I rework that into a thing I've done? I've got another video about how it's perfectly okay when you're building games to work from example code, to work from tutorials, to work from things you've done before. That's legitimate game development. That's part of how it happens. As you build up more experience, you can start pulling together more projects and get some more unusual hybrids and interesting things happening and take them further from where they started. But when you're starting out especially, it's a handy idea. So even if you're doing that mock-up screenshot, maybe think in terms of beginning from drawing something kind of like what you've been able to do so far with tutorials or class time or whatever, and then rethink, okay, well, which of these elements could I change and how, and their consequences of collisions and so on, to make the kind of game you're after. And the third point, and this is one, it's important to me. I understand it's not the same approach everybody out there has, but I'm a huge fan of the idea that you should be making your own placeholder art. And it doesn't have to be good. In fact, it shouldn't be good. Because some people get stuck on the idea of oh, I don't have time to make all that art. And that's because you're thinking the wrong way in that situation about how much time should go into that art. It should be literally just enough time to tell what it is. Can I tell it that's a chair? Can I tell it that's a staircase? Can I tell it that's a door? And then move on, because you've got to do a lot of art for games. And the great thing about this is that the problem is if you don't do this, what winds up happening is people try to start their projects by just browsing Google image search and just fiddling through looking for like what background do I want to use, and they want to put like a photograph for a background, and the elements are completely different styles, and then the things aren't animated. So when I say mock-up, just like placeholder art, don't even worry about your character being animated. Don't worry about that yet. Make rough placeholder art. It's got to be a lot more beneficial to you having flexibility and control in what you're designing and the direction it goes. If the game goes along well, replace that stuff with finer art. But so again, there's 3 ideas. Mock-up screenshot. Work backwards from some things you can do, and how could you rework those to fit what you're after. And then thirdly is to make your own placeholder art instead of using found stuff. It becomes the sort of thing that kind of winds up sidetracking your ideas into unoriginal spaces in a way that's not quite as good for you long term. At least that's been my finding with people I've trained. So that's it. Chris Dunn for GameKeto. Thanks for listening in. I'll have some new videos for you all soon. Thanks again to everyone who's been a part of our Patreon. It's going great. That's part of why we now have these YouTube videos happening every single week. Thanks, y'all.